Tonight, we travel back to the dry, wind-swept lands of the American frontier to a time when law was fragile, loyalties were shifting, and a teenager with a boyish face would become one of the most famous outlaws in history. This is the true story of Billy the Kid. His real name was Henry McCarty. Some knew him as William H. Bonney, but history would remember him by a name that still echoes through Western legend: Billy the Kid. He was born in 1859, likely in New York City, though even his birthplace remains uncertain. That uncertainty would follow him throughout his life. Records were scarce, identities were fluid, and reinvention was common on the American frontier. Billy's early years were marked not by violence, but by instability. His father disappeared early in his life, and his mother, Catherine, moved west with her sons in search of opportunity and better health. They eventually settled in the New Mexico Territory, a harsh and restless land where cultures collided and the rule of law was thin. When Catherine died of tuberculosis in 1874, Billy was just 15 years old. He was alone. Those who knew him described him as small, quick, and unusually charismatic. He had bright blue eyes and an easy smile. He was literate. Not something you could say for every young man on the frontier. He could charm people, and that charm would help him survive. His first arrest came soon after his mother's death. He was accused of stealing food and clothing, a minor crime but symbolic. It marked the beginning of a life that would drift further from stability and deeper into violence. He escaped jail. That escape was not dramatic. He simply slipped up a chimney and disappeared into the desert night. It was the first sign that Billy was not just reckless, he was clever. By the mid-1870s, the New Mexico Territory was boiling with tension. Economic rivalries between powerful business factions would erupt into what became known as the Lincoln County War. On one side stood established merchants and political figures. On the other, rising ranchers seeking control of trade and cattle contracts. Billy aligned himself with an English rancher named John Tunstall. Tunstall treated him well. For a brief time, Billy found something close to belonging, but when Tunstall was murdered by rivals in 1878, everything changed. The killing was not just personal, it was political, and it ignited a conflict that would define Billy's life. In response, Billy joined a group known as the Regulators, a posse formed to avenge Tunstall's death. What followed was a cycle of retaliation, ambushes, and open gunfights. During this period, Billy killed for the first time. Accounts differ on how many men he ultimately killed. Some claim 21, one for each year of his life. Modern historians believe the number was likely closer to 4 to 9. But numbers mattered less than reputation. And Billy's reputation was growing. He was no longer just a drifting orphan. He was now an armed participant in a regional war. One of the most violent episodes of the Lincoln County War culminated in a 5-day battle in the town of Lincoln in July 1878. Gunfire echoed through adobe walls. Buildings burned. The territory seemed on the brink of chaos. Federal troops eventually intervened, effectively ending the conflict, but Billy emerged from it as a wanted man. He had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Now fully outside the law, Billy turned to cattle rustling and gambling to survive, but what made him different from many other outlaws was his ability to move between communities. He spoke fluent Spanish and was known to socialize easily with Mexican families in the region. He was often described as polite, even cheerful. This duality fascinated people. How could someone so personable be responsible for so much violence? In 1880, a new sheriff was elected in Lincoln County, Pat Garrett. Garrett had once known Billy. They had crossed paths socially, but now they stood on opposite sides of the law. Garrett was determined to restore order. In December of that year, he tracked Billy to Fort Sumner. Under cover of darkness, Garrett and his deputies surrounded the building where Billy was staying. When Billy stepped into the night, he was captured without a gunfight. He was tried and convicted for the murder of Sheriff William Brady, committed during the Lincoln County War. The sentence was death by hanging. Billy the Kid was 21 years old. He was transported to the courthouse in Lincoln to await execution. 2 deputies, James Bell and Bob Ollinger, were assigned to guard him. What happened next would cement his legend forever. On April 28, 1881, Billy asked to be escorted outside. While descending the stairs, he slipped free from his restraints. In the struggle, he shot Deputy Bell. Moments later, he retrieved a shotgun and waited for Ollinger to return. When Ollinger entered the courtyard below, Billy called out and fired from above, killing him instantly. Then he did something almost unthinkable. He calmly walked to the blacksmith, had his shackles removed, mounted a horse, and rode out of town. Alone. It was one of the most daring jailbreaks in American history. For nearly 3 months, he evaded capture again, but the net was tightening. Sheriff Garrett was relentless. On the night of July 14, 1881, Garrett tracked Billy once more to Fort Sumner. Accounts of what happened next vary, but most agree on the essentials. Garrett entered a darkened bedroom in a house owned by Pete Maxwell. Billy, sensing movement, reportedly asked in Spanish, "¿Quién es?" "Who is it?" Garrett fired 2 shots. One bullet struck Billy in the chest. He died within minutes. He was buried the next day in the Fort Sumner Cemetery alongside 2 of his former companions. He was 21 years old, and yet his story did not end there. In death, Billy the Kid became something larger than life. Newspapers exaggerated his crimes. Dime novels romanticized his rebellion. He was transformed from a regional outlaw into a national legend. Over time, the line between fact and myth blurred. Was he a cold-blooded killer, a product of circumstance, a symbol of youthful defiance in a lawless land? Even photography played a role in shaping his legend. For decades, only one authenticated image of Billy existed, a small tintype showing a young man holding a rifle, staring calmly into the camera. That image humanized him. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a boy. Hollywood would later reimagine his life again and again. Films, novels, and television reinvented him for each generation. But the real Billy was neither pure villain nor romantic hero. He was a teenager who lost his mother too young. He was a young man who found belonging in a violent conflict. He was intelligent, adaptable, and capable of both charm and deadly force. Most importantly, he was a product of his environment. The American frontier of the late 19th century was not the cinematic landscape we often imagine. It was unstable, politically corrupt, economically ruthless. Justice was inconsistent. Power often belonged to those with influence, not those with moral authority. In that world, someone like Billy the Kid could emerge and thrive for a time. His life lasted barely 2 decades, but his legend has endured for nearly a century and a half. Today, visitors still travel to Fort Sumner, New Mexico, to see his grave. The desert wind still moves across the same plains he once rode, and historians still debate the details of his life. Perhaps that is the true reason his story survives. Not because he was the deadliest outlaw, not because he was the most ruthless, but because he represents something uniquely American, the tension between freedom and law, rebellion and order, myth and reality. Billy the Kid was not just an outlaw. He was a reflection of a nation in transition. And in the end, that may be why we still speak his name. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the real history of the Wild West. If you appreciate thoughtful, historically grounded storytelling, consider subscribing for future episodes as we continue to explore the men, women, and events that shaped the American frontier. Until next time, the frontier remembers.